BJ counsel. I view the world through the lens of having been followed by a white clerk as a child while shopping in a five and dime. I'm a retired police executive and own UN50, which gives guidance on surviving interactions with police.
I'm Harmony Chavis, and I view the world through the lens of one of the most misunderstood and diverse generations in our nation's history. I'm a social worker and a believer of radical kindness and love as modalities of healing.
My name is Andrew Counsel. I view the world through the lens of a generational camera phone. I wake up as a black male and go to bed as a black male. I am surviving this never-ending court case we commonly call life in the best way I know how.
So thank you guys for tuning back in to UN50 for another episode of UN50. I hope everybody is doing well. There's a lot going on in the community. Just UN50, I think most of you, those of you who are new to this, know that UN50 was created to help people safely interact with law enforcement. Our primary goal, we started in 2015, has always been, still is, and will be, is getting people home. We are not really concerned about whether you like the popo, respect the popo. It's about you getting to the house, and that's what we're about. And then we have the podcast just to talk about police interactions that may be current, and then just talk about other things too, mental health, how that impacts educations, justice served persons, and how that all intertwines and kind of makes the conversation a lot bigger than just law enforcement. So we have Dr. Craig Waleed with us tonight, and we'll introduce him in a few minutes. But the first thing, one of my co-hosts, Harmony Chavis, isn't here with us tonight. She had to work, which is, got to make that money. And so I ain't mad at her. But I have my favorite nephew, because you are my what?
I'm the only nephew.
I'm the only nephew. So yeah. So Andrew is here, and the exciting news about Andrew is he will be graduating in a couple of weeks from UNCG Greensboro. So the whole family is so excited. So I'm looking forward to that. So how do you feel about that, Andrew?
I'm counting down to the second. I'm ready for 7 o'clock. 5 o'clock on May 7th. I'm ready to go. Ready to be done.
Ready to go. Come on out into the real world and get to work.
Yes.
How's that looking though? You have any good potential and stuff like that? Will you be able to get stuff? Kind of remind folks of what your major is and how you plan to use that as you walk out into your new journey.
Yes, of course. So I currently am studying communication and media studies. And originally going into school, I had a journalism focus, wanting to go into reporting. But after various experiences working professionally, I learned I've tried to find a place where I could combine my creativity for my love for working with people. So I tried to find a job that I can do both in, or a pathway to go with, and that ended up being marketing and also media and creative design. So that's what I'll be doing after graduation. I've accepted a position working somewhere in Greensboro on a brand marketing team. So I'll be doing post graduation.
Wow. Congratulations. So you have to fill your auntie in about that later, but congratulations. I'm really happy for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So
we have Dr. Craig Waleed that he and I have actually never met in person because of COVID, but he is. I met him in a meeting for the local reentry council here in Durham virtually, and heard him as he engaged. And then I also kind of did some research on him and was just really impressed with what the work that he's doing and also just who he is. And he's written a book that he's going to hopefully tell us a little bit about. But I think the first thing before, I think what I want people to know that justice served persons for UN50 is very important to me, to do the work with them as it relates to interacting with law enforcement. And Dr. Waleed may disagree with this perception, but from a law enforcement perspective, we are, unfortunately, most justice served persons return to the community from whence they came and were or arrested. And so once they come back from being incarcerated, there is this interaction sometimes that happen that's not necessarily, it's kind of business. If BJ happens to come back and the break-ins are going up, then my officers are going to interact with BJ simply because that was my MO. And all I'm saying to that is, just because of that, the officers do not have to treat you any other way or any differently, since simply because you happen to have done that before. You treat them with professionalism like you would anybody else. So it's important for them to understand that, and also understand that they did not leave their rights at the gate. And those rights, just like everybody else, is still attached to them. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understand my purpose in making sure that the voices of justice serve and those that are doing work around that have a voice in this space. That's very important to me. Dr. Waleed, I'm gonna let you go ahead and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll ask you a question that we usually ask our guests at the beginning. So thank you for saying yes to coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you, BJ, for inviting me. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you, Andrew, as well. Yeah, well, I'm new to North Carolina. I've been here just about maybe 10 months. I moved here from a small place in Western New York called Rochester, New York, around Buffalo, Syracuse area, Lake Ontario. I was born and raised there. But yeah, I moved here with my family, my wife, and my two children, a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old boy. But prior to moving here, I had been out of prison for about 22 years, 21 years. I served 8 years in prison in New York State's prisons for violent offense. I had a 4 to 12 year sentence, so I CR'd on it, or did 2/3 of that time, which was 8 years. But during my term of incarceration, I realized just what I was not. And I say that because for many years, I grew up with the misconception that Black men were ruthless, that we did things against the law, and that we really were not intellectual beings. And so if there was anything I saw from my career other than crime, it was probably working in a blue collar field, maybe in a factory or something. And I say that because the area I lived in was chock full of factories. There was Xerox, there was Kodak, there was General Motors. And so there was lots of opportunities, but that industry was dying. And so really, I didn't see any prospects for myself other than crime. And I say that simply because I didn't have a consistent role model in my life, though most of the people that came from my family, or that were in my family, or that still are in my family, were pretty upstanding citizens. You know, though I grew up in a single parent home, I didn't have that guidance that I needed, that consistent guidance and mentoring. So at any rate, I fell victim to what was in the neighborhood, what was on popular media. And so this is what I saw myself as, that same image that is portrayed of Black men in the popular media, as well as in the neighborhood. You know, the guys hanging on the block, selling drugs, doing drugs, drinking, crime. So I figured, hey, that's for me. Long story short, I got caught up into drugs, committed a violent assault, got sent away for an attempt murder and assault charge. And again, I did 8 years on that. But while I was in prison in New York State, I began taking on college courses. There was a accredited college, the Canisius College. Again, they're from the Buffalo area, but they were doing an in-prison college program. So I began taking courses, ended up just before I got out earning an associate's degree from that program. And it was during that time, though, even before I earned the degree, I began dedicating myself to doing something different than being an inmate or being a prisoner. Because as I mentioned, once I got locked up, I realized what I was not, which was, you know, a criminal, a thug, a hard nose. And I started spending a lot of time, I think in part because prison is so harsh and it's very scary. I spent a lot of time reading, trying to escape through the pages of books. And little did I know that was cultivating my intellectual abilities much more than I knew. But from there, I began reading, for other men, some of their letters, their legal mail and things of that nature, because there was a very low literacy rate in the penitentiaries. Also, I began working as a teacher's aide, helping people to begin studying for their general education diploma, because, I'd come in as a high school graduate, graduating from high school just before I got arrested. And so I had some of the basic fundamentals of academics already under my belt. But as I told you, I earned this associate's degree in prison. There were professors from the outside coming in to teach us, and I began to really look up to these people and some of the civilian administrators of the prison program. And so I found that I was really good at learning and analyzing and teaching, so that became my passion while I was in prison. And many of the people that I engaged with, they began to call me doctor and call me professor. And I'm just like, come on, man, I have a green suit like you with this, this department number on my chest, just like you. But I really told myself I want to go to college when I get out. I didn't know what I wanted to go to college for, but I got out in 97 after 8 years. Maybe a year and a half later, I enrolled in SUNY, which stands for State University of New York, at Brockport College. Enrolled in there, began developing relationships with professors, with some of the peers, many of whom were much younger than me, but mostly professors. I ended up earning a bachelor's degree in health science there. And I started working back in the community that I came from, working with formerly incarcerated people as a substance abuse counselor, and then as a reentry case manager. But one of the things that I started to realize is that there isn't much room for growth in the position that I was filling as a substance abuse counselor, as a case manager. And the people who were supervising me, I really thought that I was just as smart as them, if not smarter, And so I figured I needed to get my credentials up. So I went back to school and earned a master's of science in mental health counseling. And I began teaching around that same time in the junior colleges. And then the program that I graduated from with my master's of mental health counseling, they recruited me to come back and start teaching there. And so I continued to teach for a while in the junior college and at SUNY. And then eventually I got hired full time to work with first generation students at SUNY. But at the same time, I think just before I got hired there, in 2018, I graduated from St. John Fisher College. I'm skipping over some detail, but the long story short is that after meeting all the professors on campus and, politicking with them, talking with them, exchanging ideas with them, I realized that though I didn't have their credentials, these people were my peers, And so, again, I wanted to, buck the ideal of what it means to be a formerly incarcerated person. And so that, for one, is why I went to school. But also, I went to school to increase my opportunity to earn a living, also to have greater potential for accessing the type of work I wanted to do, which was higher ed, which was more academic, cerebral work. And then, I think that the tertiary, or maybe even the main thing, was to really serve as an example for other people coming out of prison, people who are going to prison, people who were stuck in these cycles of bad decisions, addiction, to just be an unofficial role model of sorts to them, to let them know that you can change your trajectory. And so for me, changing my trajectory had a lot to do with pursuing higher education. And so I moved here to North Carolina late last year, just before the COVID outbreak. And since being here, I've landed a job working at UNC at Chapel Hill in the School of Medicine's Re-envisioning Health and Justice Lab, where we're doing lots of research around health disparities that are impacting justice and about people.
Wow, that's a lot. You've accomplished a lot, my man. And I appreciate the fact that you said, you're trying to make, and one of the main things is to set the example and also change the perspectives of
Yeah,
other folks around you too, that just don't make the assumptions. I mean, you're not defined by something you did once, you know what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
so people have this whole thing. When I talk to some of the folks that are justice serves or it's like, the only difference between me and you is I didn't get caught.
I hear that a lot.
I mean, seriously, and I own that. I own that on a whole lot of levels.
Yeah.
And people need to, and I wish other people would just recognize that you just didn't get caught, boo. You just didn't get caught. That's all it is. And you need to recognize that and stop looking at folks out sideways. So anyway, I think I'm going to ask you this real quick, and because like I said, I need to ask our guest. So you have lived through COVID. We all have, thankfully and blissfully. So having done that, who are you that you have survived COVID? Who is Dr. Waleed having survived this thing?
Yeah, who am I? I'll tell you that I simply am. It's that simple. I am. But I guess to add to that, I am that which thinks and feels and acknowledges the experiences that I've had wrapped in this physical form, which is known as my body. But ultimately, I am that which thinks and feels and is aware. And so that is really a formless, shapeless, colorless entity. I am emotion. I am cognition. And I am that emotional cognition that continues to grow based on the experiences that I'm experiencing in this celestial form.
Wow. Actually, that's probably one of the best ones I've heard so far. So thank you. Wow, I appreciate that. So yeah, just being human, and we are, and I am. Awesome. Thank you very much for that. You've written a book called Prison to Promise, a Chronicle of Healing and Transformation. And I've, read some of the stuff that you sent me. And you've also, you hit on already, because I had the question, it was like, what a Black man should be. You've kind of already hit on that in your description. The other thing I want you to talk about briefly is you said you changed your last name.
Yes.
So kind of take us through that for a second, and because I got some other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the criticisms I got from one of my friends was you should have wrote about your name in your book and how you changed it. And I think that's very important. But what the long and tall and skinny, should I say, of that is, while I was incarcerated, I gravitated towards older men who were incarcerated. And this was maybe the first time I really had consistent, ongoing mentorship from men.
Wow.
And many of these men were old timers that had been in prison for 20 plus years. Some of them were not getting out, but they were full of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And that was something that I knew I needed and wanted. And so some of the men that I spent time with, they were of Islamic or Muslim affiliation. And so we spent lots of time studying, reading, exchanging books, exchanging notes, just politicking. And one of the guys christened me Akil Aswad Waleed. So Akil, Aswad, Waleed are Arabic words. Akil means he who uses reasoning well, intelligent. And so he told me, I'm giving you this name, or I'm going to call you this if it's okay with you, because you strike me as a very intelligent brother from the time I met you. And he's watched me mature and grow over maybe the period of 3 or 4 years it was. Aswad means black in Arabic, because lots of our studies centered around being black or being a black man, looking at the history and the future trajectory of black people. And then Waleed is Arabic for newborn baby, or to be reborn. And so I wanted to hold on to my given name, which is Craig. And so I took on those other names and legally changed my name to Craig Akil Aswad Waleed, which means Craig is an intelligent Black man who is born each day, or who is reborn each day.
Wow.
And then, I was even more so open to that because growing up, I grew up in this single parent home, and my mother had been married and divorced, and she had continued to carry her former husband's name. And so when I was born, I was given his last name. My own birth father was really a no-show. And so at one point I was thinking about changing my name to his name, but I was like, the heck with that, because he don't even claim me, but I don't want to carry this other man's name because he's not even my family. He's a good man, but he ain't my people. And so once, the brother was like, look, man, this is the name I got for you. I was open to it because, again, I also thought that it reflected who I am and who I want to be, because I think it's very important that, at least for me, when I chose my son's names, I chose names, they're Arabic names, but they're names that when people call their name, they are empowering them. And so I think that our name should speak of our characteristics, who we are or who we want to be. And so my sons, just to deviate a bit, one of my sons, his name is Ismail Malik. Ismail means Allah or God listens or hears. Malik is king. And my other son, his name is Isa Muhammad. Isa is the Arabic word for Jesus. Muhammad, again, is another prophet's name. So when you speak my son's names, you are speaking power to them. So that's pretty much, I guess, the tall and skinny of all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Andrew, you got anything before I ask him some more questions?
No, I was thinking to myself, I would enjoy one of your classes or taking a course on you just to listen to some of the things that you talk about and just explain. That's all.
Oh, thank you, brother. I miss teaching too. I used to teach counselor ed, intro to counseling, group counseling concepts, and interpersonal speech communication.
Wow.
Yeah, and I used to love those classes because we would go deep, and sometimes we'd go off of the curriculum and just really get into the meat of life.
Right.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. So speaking of getting into the meat of life, I was reading your stuff, and one of the things that struck me is you recall, I think you said you recall showing signs of violent behavior at the age of 5. And our producer and I were kind of talking about some stuff that has happened recently, right? That's been going on. Obviously, Chauvin, Ma'Khia Bryant, Isaiah, I could go on. But one of the things that I kind of want to, from your perspective and just your academic and mental health and counseling, when I hear that 5-year-old behavior, violent behavior, right? So what I'm trying to figure out, and the discussion, I think, as Black people, we need to figure out, well, Ma'Khia Bryant. The issue for me in this particular moment is not what the officer did. What I'm looking at is trying to figure out, why does a 16-year-old believe that picking up a steak knife is a resolution to a problem? And how do we address that? How did the community fail that she thought that and not just her, but just, our community? Mr. Isaiah Brown in Virginia, who called the police at 3 a.m, the same guy that supposedly took him home from a broken down vehicle. Mr. Isaiah Brown calls the police, and the dispatch tape says he's saying, my brother won't let me into my mother's room. Why are we calling the police, the government, to come into our homes to fix arguments that we should be able to do ourselves? So I kind of, from your perspective, because that, why, what is a Black man supposed to look like? Is hopefully solving his or her problems without having to call a government in, or representative of a government, who may end up arresting you or shooting you. So I guess I just would like to get some input as to those perspectives when we're dealing with a 16-year-old that says, I'm going to end this argument by picking up this knife. Where is it that we have failed as a community in helping, like you just said to Andrew, how to communicate? Where is that, and how is it that a 5-year-old begins to have violent behavior?
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair and valid question, and it's one that needs to continue to be explored. But what I tend to think about is not so much maybe what's wrong with this young person, but more so what has happened to this young person.
Right.
Right. Something has happened or continues to happen that has conditioned them to believe that this is the choice of behavior or the option of behavior that they have to choose from versus anything else. And oftentimes, I think if you peel back the layers, you'll find that the child has been hurt or victimized at some point in their lives. I can say for myself, definitely at a very young age, because my mother couldn't watch me while she had to go work, she left me in the hands of other people who took advantage of me. And so at a very young age, I was sexually assaulted, verbally assaulted, and I saw things that I should not have seen. And so I remember coming of age, not understanding why I felt the way I felt, but I knew that I had been violated and hurt, and that I needed to make sure that I watched over myself. And so that was what I guess I chose as a way of protecting myself, because I didn't know any other way from the age of 5 or 6. Not to mention, again, I think growing up, when I grew up, this was around maybe the year 1975 or 1976. So we're coming right off the heels of the blaxploitation movies and whatnot, and Black folks are starting to get due in mass media. But all the imagery of Black folks in media were of violent anti-heroes or heroes and sheroes or very lowly characters. And so, again, like a bass, I swallowed hook, line, and sinker this ideology that a Black boy is to be rough and tough and willing to navigate and exact violence, And so I think for many young Black children, especially those young people, as well as older people who are growing up in impoverished, in marginalized communities, we're going to see more of this type of behavior. And I think that's simply because of the lack of resources and the need to, I guess, almost scrape and struggle for some sense of survival. And then we know that in these very same communities, there's a high incidence of violence. And so not only violence, but people are witnessing violence at very young ages. Young people are also being, again, assaulted, not just physically or sexually, but also verbally,
right?
And not just physical or sexual or verbally. If I'm living in a poor environment, if I'm coming from an impoverished background, I am suffering some form of oppression and violence in and of itself. Violence, or should I say poverty, is violence. Not having resources is violence. And so all of these traumas, they pile up on people. And so what we are seeing, I think, essentially are trauma responses, particularly, I'm sure other people are doing it too, but as we talk about our own Black communities, our own Black selves, I think what we are seeing are trauma responses. And if it's not from poverty, it's from marginalization, just from the larger community, because sometimes we have Black folks who are coming out of very well-to-do backgrounds, but all these microaggressions that they experience over their lifetime, from white folks, other folks, even folks that look like them, who are having lesser expectations of them, who are maybe putting impediments in front of them to make them work extra hard to reach success when their parents or they themselves have put themselves in a position where they thought that they could get success. All of these are traumatic events, be they large or small. And I think that over time they accumulate. It's like Mos Def, the rapper, said in his song Mathematics. He said, why did the one straw break the camel's back? Here's the secret. There was a million other straws underneath it. It's all mathematics.
Wow. Andrew, you got anything?
There was a lot to unpack in what he just said. There was something that I was thinking about as he was talking. There's something that there's a theory that we talk about in my degree program called the cultivation race theory, or the cultivation theory, basically echoing what you just said about like students or just society and culture just see a certain image of a certain race identity or a certain subset of people, and we cultivate that in our own brains, and the society cultivates that in their own brains. So it's like we can't really blame like certain specific subsets of people for things, or for like people being violent, or for other traits that are passed down from generation or through race. It's like the thought of it being cultivated throughout society is just something that I don't know what needs to happen to stop it, but it just cultivates through itself, and it repeats itself all the time.
Absolutely.
So how do we do that? As a community, what is it? We need to really get away from the popo coming in solving all our problems, because that ain't working, clearly. Popo need to just do what the popo do and not try to figure out how to come into somebody's house to figure out how to solve their marriage problems. You know what I'm saying? That's just not where we belong. So how do you do that? And before you talk about it, I want to go back to what you said, that's really, for me, kids living in these communities, or some of these communities, seeing this trauma, having to go to school the next day after they saw a body laying in the middle of the street. And then you have some level of it, the next day they have this kid to come in and try to do his or her work. Come on now, we need to figure out how to recognize where these kids are and go, well, he probably didn't do his homework last night. How do we have those conversations to help? And it's nothing that nobody knows, but I guess just want your opinion on that. What's the conversation? What's the conversation around that?
Yeah, well, that's another great question, BJ. And I don't think there's necessarily a panacea or a one size fits all for that.
Oh yeah. Right.
But I think what would help for sure is that educators or care providers or whoever is an authority figure in this child's life who is outside of their day-to-day reality to have empathy and have patience. I think those things are important. And maybe, and I won't even say maybe, but I know for certain, take the initiative to cultivate a relationship with the child. One of the things that I know from my years of professional experience and academic experience is that the relationship is oftentimes the greatest motivator of change, and so having a relationship with a kind, compassionate, sincere person, teacher, neighbor, police officer for that matter, whoever it might be.
Mentor.
Yeah. I think that can really make a big difference in a young person's life.
Yeah.
Also helping that young person maybe gain some sort of exposure outside of their day-to-day reality. It's like planting seeds. All the time when you plant seeds, I think Jesus is known for the parable of the husbandryman who is, tossing seeds in the ground. And he says something to the degree that some of the seeds will catch, some of the seeds will get strangled by the thorns, some will get burned out by the sun, something to that degree. I know I'm not saying it 100%, but I think folks who know the parable, they get it. And so it's the same thing. I think when we expose children who've been marginalized or who have lack of exposure to other alternatives, it's like planting seeds, We're the farmers. We plant the seeds and then we may not watch it grow or germinate, but we planted the seed.
Exactly.
So I think that's a big step. And then also when it comes to the Jakes, to the Popo, to the 5-0, to one time. I think that they are involved in too many things.
Yep.
You get a person with a gun and a badge, answering for everything just about. It's almost like having a hammer as your only tool.
Yeah.
My windows need clean, hit it with the hammer.
Yeah.
My toilet needs
Yep.
clean, hit it with the hammer.
Right. Yeah.
My stove ain't working, hit it with the hammer.
Right. Yeah.
That's just not gonna work. And
Yeah. Yeah.
not for nothing, I saw these little kids a couple of weeks ago. They were hanging out. I mean, they were little, like maybe 5 or 3 years old, and they were like really close to the road. And it didn't seem like they were around any houses. I didn't see any adults. And I was really concerned, but they were little girls. I didn't want to stop and get out the car. Maybe
Right.
have somebody, saying I'm trying to be mannish or fresh or,
Yeah.
children. But I was really concerned. So I struggled. But I ended up calling 911,
Mhm.
And so the lady on the other end, she says, okay, well, we'll send an officer out. I said, is there anyone else you can send out other than an officer? She says, why? This is the police station you called. I said, I understand, ma'am. I said, but God bless the family or the children when the officer shows up. She says, why? I says, because oftentimes when the police show up, things go south.
Right.
Things go south.
Yeah. You're right. And amen, brother. As far as the popo got too much, I mean, society, the police chief down in Dallas who had some officers killed several years ago, he said, the community or society has laid everything at the doorstep of law enforcement, and it's just not right. I mean, we go to stuff and we know we need another resource, and the resource is either, we ain't got no room, or we ain't got no space. And so here we go. I mean, so you hit, yes, totally too much is being asked of the popo. So we got to figure out. And I think that's what a lot of people, when they say defund, they're just trying to figure out what can we do so the law enforcement doesn't have to do it.
Right.
I mean,
take some of that military budget and aim it towards some sort of social wellness programs, or social wellness responders or something to that degree. Because you don't need a gun and bullets in a
for
flat
everything.
packet.
Yeah,
for
you don't.
everything.
You don't. And you just in the community, that in each individual community, that's what we taught. We did that. We did a presentation on defund, and the thing is diversity. You got to do each community is as diverse as the world is, and so you got to figure out what's going to fit here. Because some folks might be, we're okay with that. So yeah. I mean, this is really, really good stuff. I guess the main thing is just to have these conversations and have people at the table. So one of the questions I ask as we get ready to close out is, what would you offer as to what would a compassionate judicial system look like? If you could say, this is what I think a judicial system would look like, and you would consider it compassionate, right? So what would that look like for you if you were able to go, okay, that's a compassionate justice system. What does it look like? And why would it look like that?
Yeah. And, that's a great question. Again, you're coming up with some bangers.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, those are some great questions. And I think more people need to consider these things, and maybe sit down and have a beer and talk about such things, or whatever they do when they're politicking. But I think a compassionate justice system would really be less punitive to begin with, because one of the things I think about is, when we look at the history of the justice system, once this tough on crime enactment or approach started to be implemented, there was no more compassion. There was no more patience. There was no more treatment. The only treatment people got was brutality, punishment, and we know that, if you kick a dog long enough, a nice dog, it's going to bite you. If you take and if you take someone who isn't well to begin with and you treat them very harsh for an extended period of time, they're only going to get worse. And I say that because the vast majority of people who find themselves in prisons and jails today are, one, mostly poor, two, mostly undereducated, and three, many of them have mental health and other health challenges that the penitentiary, the jail, the prison only serves to exacerbate. So I think that if the justice system, or the legal system, as I like to call it, because there is no justice, as Rich Pryor once said, when you look around, it's just us, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, I really think that if people could be diverted maybe to treatment, and again, reenacting educational opportunities inside prisons and jails, I think that that might help turn the tide. I was down in the North Carolina, one of the libraries a couple of weeks ago, where they have archives, and I was looking at some microfilm of an old prison newspaper from like the 1800s, and they knew this back then when they were doing jails. And I can't really remember exactly what it said, but it said that education is the panacea to crime. So if you educate a person, they'll stop doing crime. If you give a person adequate treatment and not subpar treatment like they do in many of these prisons, people might return back to their communities that are broken, but in better condition to maybe help heal and build their communities back up. So I think that this is what a just justice system would look like.
Wow. I really appreciate that. And you're absolutely right, Andrew. Yeah, I mean, education is the key. Yes. Andrew, you got anything?
Not necessarily. I had a question about some of the research that he has done in like prior, but I can ask that after because it's not related.
Okay.
If I could add on.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
When we talk about education too, I think it's so important to really think about the etymology of education. It comes from this Latin root, educere or educo, which really means to bring forward or to bring out that which is latent, and so I think people need great training so that they can earn for themselves and maybe begin to think different, but also they need to be educated in the sense that they need to get some sort of therapy or training or teaching that will help them to tap into their natural proclivities and use those things to make their lives and the lives of others better. For example, if you've ever been to a circus or a zoo or somewhere like that, and you see the bear, doing tricks, or you see the seal doing tricks, that it's well trained. It's well trained, like someone who goes to school. But if they have not learned what their natural proclivities are, then they're uneducated, like these wild animals I just talked about in the circus or the zoo. If you release them in their natural habitat, they'll suffer because they have not been educated. They don't know how to survive. And so I think that we have to learn who we are and what we are, what our potentials are, and how we can use those potentials or proclivities to add on to not only our lives, but the lives of those people that we live amongst and touch.
Wow. I mean, to me, and I may be, what that sounds like to me is education can help you recognize what your walk is on this earth and what your journey is. Because based on what you said in the beginning, Dr. Waleed, was you began to go, oh yeah. I mean, it sounded like when you recognize this is what I want to do, it was like internally you recognize, your spirit recognized that you were educated because it was like, I mean, your soul is satisfied, and the work that I'm doing at UN50, I don't have a college degree, but it was like the journey was go to law enforcement, and now here I am, and this is satisfying my soul. And so education, I would like to kind of just reframe that, and it's just like finding out what you're here to do. What is your walk? And then figuring out what that looks like and how that passes out to the rest of the beings on this planet.
Absolutely. Bob Marley sang in one of his songs, he said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Yeah. Wow. I can't wait till we really have a real world again, Dr. Waleed, so we can have you know, lunch you could buy. Look, I ain't ashamed. I'm gonna say you could buy.
Yeah, I'll buy the first time. You get the next time. Yeah, I look forward to that. I would love for us to, get together and
Yeah.
politic.
Yeah, that's cool. And I definitely want us to, I don't want this to be a hit and miss because the work that you're doing, I'm definitely interested in. And I also may be reaching out as I really try to dive more into trying to make my presence and my work. Hopefully folks see the need in or around justice served organizations and individuals. So I may be tapping back onto you. So Andrew, before we close out, do you have anything?
Now that I can think, I just really enjoyed listening to this conversation. It was very eye opening. I felt like I was in a listening to a sermon because of how good it was. But I really enjoyed listening to. I would really would. It's been a long time since I've been sitting in I haven't sat in a lecture since junior year. So it's been a while since I've gotten some good face to face or screen to screen. I guess good screen to screen education and just waking up and enlightenment. So I appreciate you for coming.
I
Yeah.
appreciate hearing that, Andrew. And really, man, I really see myself in a sense as a minister of sorts, but not a minister of any particular gospel other than the gospel of, self-realization.
Right.
And so I really like to think that I come for the people who are outside of the reach of the church and the mosque and the ministers. And to speak back to one of your earlier questions about some of my research, I'll keep BJ updated, but I'm currently working on a paper, some research that I did a while ago that's looking at the impact of emotional intelligence and how it helps formerly incarcerated people avoid recidivism. And
Wow.
so I submitted the paper a couple of months ago, and they sent it back to me asking me just to make a couple of adjustments in the document. And so this will be a paper that will be published in a peer-reviewed journal called Criminal Behavior and Mental Health.
Wow. That
That's
sounds,
cool.
yeah, that sounds awesome. That sounds really awesome.
Please share that whenever you can, whenever it's finished or whenever it's out to. If you could, please, I would love to read it. I would love to.
Absolutely. And in
Yeah.
the meantime, if you just plug my name into Google, you might have an opportunity to see some of the other podcasts I've been on and some other articles and things of that nature that have been written about my journey.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
sent them the stuff that you sent me so they would at least have an idea who our guests were. So hopefully he's had a chance to look at that. But I appreciate your journey, Doc, and putting it out here for us to see and view and being the example, because that's what it's all about. It just, I guess for me, just people, I'm not, I guess I'm stumbling because law enforcement, sometimes when we roll up, and I think for me, because of the way I was raised, we were always raised is to treat people fairly and properly, no matter what their lot in life was. So that's kind of how I operated in law enforcement. Yeah, I got to put you in jail, but why am I putting you in jail? What's happening that I got to be putting you in jail? I mean, because it's just bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? It's just bigger than that. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate the fact just talking about, we all got to find out what we're supposed to do here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, what good is my life if I don't share my lessons, with other people? What
Yeah.
good is it? It does me no good anymore if I just keep it to myself. It's sort of like, we are like the ants, of the earth, and we are better when we are together, and we are better when we support each other, just like the ants are. The one ant don't really do a whole lot, but when that ant is with its whole organism, its whole colony, they do amazing things. And so, I want to be able to share my experiences with other people with hopes that I can help empower them and encourage them to move forward.
Well, I'll definitely be pushing your name out there when I get in those spaces, and I think that you could be a benefit to them. So trust and believe I will be pushing you out there in those places. And I hope the folks that are listening too as well will reach out to you. We'll have Dr. Waleed's contact information and his information as part of the podcast when it airs, so people are interested in reaching out to him. All right. So thank you, Dr. Waleed, for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I look forward to again seeing you, hopefully soon in real life. I appreciate you hanging out with us. Andrew, you got anything to close us out with?
Nothing, not much. Just good to see y'all enjoyed this conversation. I really did.
Cool.
Thank you, brother. And you can find me on Twitter at Craig Waleed. You Twitter me at Craig Waleed.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Glad you said that. And I need to start asking my guests that. So you just gave me something I need to do. I got to write down. I always say that. So yeah. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So yes, thank you. So always, as hope everybody is safe and well, and hopefully you'll continue to listen to us on the podcast. We also can be viewed if you just kind of want to go, what does BJ look like? You can see us on our YouTube channel. So as always, stay safe, stay well, peace.
Peace.